Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. For those of you who've been to Brem events before, I'm so happy to be with you again. For those who are new, welcome to the Brem family. Thank you also to the Brem Foundation for Chemo Prevention for supporting this event. I'm Andrea Wolf, the CEO of the Brem Foundation to Defeat Breast Cancer, and I'm thrilled to be here today with you, Carly Fiorina, and Rachel Brem. What an honor. Normally, I talk to you about how my grandmother survived breast cancer at age 33, my mother at age 37, and how I was the first of my generation to have prophylactic mastectomies so that I would not have to count myself among the ranks of survivors. And normally, we'd be in the room with you, and we would see each other's faces and feel the warmth of being close. But nothing is normal now. Bob Marley once said, "You never know how strong you are until being strong is your only choice." Everyone here today is linked by the stresses, opportunities, and uncertainties before us. But we're also linked by our grace under pressure, our ability to turn challenge into success, and our fortitude in the face of unsolicited adversity. That is why these speakers are perfect for today. I've had the privilege of hearing Carly Fiorina speak before, and you're in for a treat. No one is able to turn adversity into advantage like Carly. I'm also honored to introduce Dr. Rachel Brem. She moves mountains, saves lives, and is a rock star in normal and challenging times. Before I turn it over to them, I'd like to tell you a bit about the Brem Foundation and our response to the COVID-19 crisis. The Brem Foundation maximizes women's chances of finding early curable breast cancer through education, access for women in need, and physician training. Brem zealously focuses on the early detection of breast cancer because breast cancer is 95% curable when caught in its earliest stages. In pursuit of our mission, Brem has educated over 5,000 people in person about early detection. We've digitally educated over 1.2 million people, offered free rides to over 350 women to breast care appointments, and provided over 1,200 diagnostic tests to women in need. Just last year, Brem created the country's first cost-free transportation program dedicated to breast care. We launched an award-winning video to bring breast health to the masses and supported the country's only breast imaging fellowship that includes patient outreach and education. Now, though, we are streamlining our focus on breast care during and after COVID-19. The Brem COVID-19 Emergency Initiative helps the women who, because of COVID-19, haven't gotten breast care in 3 months. We're determined to help women who lost their jobs and their health coverage get mammograms and diagnostic tests. We're also teaching people how to convert bras to masks to help lower income communities access protective gear during this pandemic. And that's where you come in. We need you to join our fight. If you are so moved, your support of the Brem COVID-19 emergency initiatives today will save lives. On behalf of women in need, I am very grateful. Just a few items to note before we start. If you have any questions throughout the program, please enter them into your Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We'll have a robust question and answer period after Carly's speech. If we have technical difficulties, which we don't expect but sometimes happen, please bear with us. Also, we will continue to send a donation link in the chat box throughout the program. When you feel moved, please use that link to support the Brem emergency initiatives and also share that link with others in your networks. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce Dr. Rachel Brem. Dr. Brem will talk to us about the state of breast care during COVID-19 and will share some personal insights from her own battle with COVID. Dr. Brem is the Director of Breast Imaging and Intervention Center at George Washington University. She's the Chief Medical Officer of the Brem Foundation. She's a zealot for early detection, a breast cancer survivor, a decorated physician scientist, and most importantly for me, she's my mom and the grandmother to my 4 daughters. Welcome, Dr. Brem, also known as Mom.
Andrea, thank you so much for the lovely introduction. I'm delighted to be joining everyone here on the Zoom call. I like to think of myself as a trailblazer and identifying novel approaches to improving the care and survival of women with breast cancer. I have spent my life dedicated to women with breast cancer not COVID-19. But COVID-19 seemed to seek me out as a trailblazer. I was the second person diagnosed with COVID-19 in Baltimore County, Maryland, in early March 2020. I developed many of the symptoms you know too well: an endless deep cough, shortness of breath, weeks of intermittent fevers, abdominal pain, loss of taste and smell, and indescribable fatigue and muscle pain. But I am one of the lucky ones. I survived, recuperated at home, and am now fully recovered and back at work. Once again, I can focus on the care of women to prevent and treat breast cancer, although the landscape has changed dramatically. Breast cancer has been an integral part of my life. When I was 12 years old, my beautiful 33-year-old mother was diagnosed with breast cancer. That experience led me to medical school and to a career dedicated to beating this disease. At the age of 37, while trying new ultrasound equipment, I found my own breast cancer, and after bilateral mastectomies and chemotherapy, joined the ranks of breast cancer survivors. This further deepened my resolve to develop novel diagnostic technologies. These technologies are part of the extraordinary scientific developments that have resulted in a 40% reduction in the death rate from breast cancer over the past 2 decades. Today, I come to you as a physician scientist and a specialist in the early detection of breast cancer to tell you that things have changed. Even with these changes, our resolve to beat breast cancer has never been stronger, especially for those facing health disparities. We live in tough times. Breast screenings were halted in March. Elective surgeries were canceled, including surgeries in women with newly diagnosed breast cancer. These surgeries had to wait to conserve personal protective equipment for healthcare workers, increase hospital capacity for COVID patients, conserve our precious blood supply, and protect patients from exposure to COVID-19, especially cancer patients who are more susceptible to serious complications from COVID. So what are we to do for breast care during these times? 3 main things. First, take self-exam seriously. Until breast centers fully reopen, it is your best option. Second, know your risk factors so that when screening does reopen, you can be knowledgeable about what you need. Third, monitor the status of breast screening in your state and your region, so you know when you can obtain your much needed, although somewhat delayed, life-saving breast cancer screening. And above all, don't skip this year's screening due to the delay. Every day, physicians like myself are making difficult risk-benefit decisions. These decisions include open communication with patients to determine who can wait for surgery and who cannot, where a patient lives, and the COVID situation in that area is a major factor in our determinations. Every day, we are faced with weighing the concerns of delaying treatment for breast cancer with the increased risk of serious COVID-19 infections. These are difficult, heart-wrenching decisions for both the patient and their provider. For newly diagnosed patients who can wait to have surgery, we have excellent targeted medicines that can treat breast cancer. Hormone therapy for those with estrogen receptor positive cancers and Herceptin for those with HER2 positive cancers are just 2 examples of medical options that newly diagnosed patients have to treat their breast cancer while awaiting the reopening of operating rooms. Some institutions like mine, the George Washington University, are beginning to safely open our operating rooms to treat women with breast cancer who have waited and can wait no longer. As for screening, the landscape is fluid. As I mentioned, from March until May, screenings were halted, even for high-risk women. Nationally, screenings were down 85 to 94%. Now, different states are lifting restrictions at different paces and in different ways. Many breast centers like ours are implementing the highest safety measures so that when women return for their screening, they will be safe. These measures include daily screening for COVID of all staff and patients, social distancing by reducing the number of patients in the office at any given time, deep cleaning between every patient, and strategies to minimize the time and number of people in the facility at once. I urge you to check your state status to better understand when screening has reopened. For symptomatic women, care has never stopped. We never stopped seeing women with breast problems. The Brem Foundation has always emphasized that no one knows a woman as well as she knows herself. If you have a problem, reach out to your healthcare provider. Get the imaging and the care you need. It is available to you now and has been throughout the pandemic. This is all new to us, as it is to you, but the commitment to the detection of early curable breast cancer is no less, just different. We know that the necessary delay will result in some cancers being detected later. We hope that this will not substantially impact survival. However, in the current environment, it's the best that can be done safely. So how is COVID and breast cancer similar? They both require us to harness the fears associated with disease for the better. With COVID, do all you can to avoid the disease. Stay home as much as possible. Wear face coverings when you are out. Wash your hands and maintain social distancing. With breast cancer, be diligent about breast self-exam. And as we move forward, remember to have risk-based screening. Have your annual mammogram, but your annual mammogram may not be enough. For women with dense breasts, insist on annual ultrasound. And in women at greater risk, MRI may be needed. We are committed to maintaining the extraordinary gains we have achieved in decreasing the death rate from breast cancer, only a bit differently for now. Please do all that you can to prevent both breast cancer and COVID-19. Now, it gives me great pleasure, and personally, I'm thrilled to introduce Carly Fiorina. Carly is a tested leader and problem solver. She has led through difficult times, including a severe economic recession, the SARS and Ebola outbreak, and 9/11. Carly began her career as a secretary for a 9-person real estate business and eventually became the first woman ever to lead a Fortune 50 company. When she was recruited to lead Hewlett-Packard in 1999, the industry was facing the worst technology recession in 25 years. Under Carly's leadership, revenue grew, innovation tripled, growth quadrupled, and HP became the 11th largest company in the United States. After leaving Hewlett-Packard, Carly focused her efforts on giving back. Prior to founding the Unlocking Potential Foundation, she served as the chairman of Good 360, the world's largest product philanthropy organization, and as chairman of Opportunity International, an organization that lifts millions out of poverty through microfinance. She also founded the One Women Initiative with Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice to engage and empower women in Pakistan, Egypt, India, and the Philippines through increased access to economic opportunity. In 2016, Carly ran for the US presidency. She is also a best-selling author. She is a breast cancer survivor, an innovative pioneer, and someone I am honored to call my friend. Carly, thank you so much for being here. We are thrilled to welcome you to the Brem Foundation's Empower Hour.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel and Andrea. It is my great pleasure to be here for so many reasons, and thank you for that very gracious introduction. You know, I first got to know Rachel because she was my breast doctor. My husband and I moved back home to Virginia in 2011. I had just gone through a rather long and harrowing journey with breast cancer myself, and Rachel took me under her wing and into her care. And so I can tell you, for all of you who may not be familiar with Rachel, let me just say, listen to this doctor's advice, because it's the best advice you'll get, and it is delivered with compassion and care also, always. So thank you, Rachel, for all that you do. Andrea, thank you for your work as CEO of the Brem Foundation, and thank you all for joining and supporting the work of this wonderful organization. I can speak from very personal experience that all of the work of the Brem Foundation and all of the advice that Dr. Brem just gave you is spot on. You see, I'm one of those women who discovered my own lump, my own cancer through a self-exam. I'm one of those women who would perhaps not be here without that self-exam. I had a very aggressive and quite unexpected form of bout with breast cancer. And I also know the impact of access to the right kind of healthcare. I was so fortunate to be very close by to one of the finest hospitals in the world. And the access I had to that quality of care made all the difference in the world. So the work of the Brem Foundation to encourage early detection, to provide access for those who are less fortunate, to make sure that women are taking care of themselves and that those who understand how to help them with that care are nearby. All of this is work that is vital to saving women's lives. It's interesting, but prior to being asked by Rachel and Andrea whether I would address you today, believe it or not, I have been thinking a lot about the similarities of my own emotional journey with cancer and the journey that we're all taking together with COVID-19. I think there is a lot that we learn in the same way, regardless of what the disease is. I remember in particular the disorientation I felt when my doctor said to me something that was completely unexpected and unforeseen. There was no history in my family. You have cancer. We don't know what kind. It's very aggressive. We need to begin tests immediately. I remember that feeling of disorientation. Wait a second, I have plans. Wait a second, this wasn't in the plan. Wait a second, I have plans for later today. I have plans for later this year. My world suddenly changed and I was not in control of how my world was changing. And for a type A control freak, which I confess to be, that was disorienting. I remember the fear. Now what? How sick am I? Am I going to die? What is the treatment going to be like? How is my family going to react? How are my friends going to react to this news? I remember the exhaustion, of course, of the treatment, but also the exhaustion of having to deal with a whole new routine in my life, a routine that I hadn't really prepared for, but a routine that took over my life. I remember the nagging worry as time wore on and I felt weaker and weaker, the nagging worry about whether I would ever be the same again, whether I would ever feel the same again, whether my life would ever be the same again. And while I am one of the lucky ones, I also remember the grief of losing others. At the end of my journey, we lost our younger daughter. And I remember the crashing feeling of grief at her loss. And I also remember the guilt of thinking, oh, what could have been different had I been stronger when she had needed me most. And the guilt of surviving when others do not. Now, if you think about all those emotions, as I have been, I think they are very similar to the emotions we are all going through now. We have all experienced this feeling of disorientation. What do you mean there's a global pandemic? What do you mean I need to stay home? What do you mean my job is gone? What do you mean I'm trapped in this small room with my family? That feeling of disorientation, then the feeling of fear. How will I cope? How will others cope? Will I get sick? Will others get sick? The feeling of exhaustion day after day with a routine that, let's face it, can be exhausting. And the feeling of this nagging worry. Will things ever be the same again? And how will we all cope? And then, of course, the grief if we've lost people we care about. And the guilt that some haven't survived And we have. And yet for all those feelings, and those feelings are real, you've had them and I've had them. I also remember a feeling of wonder as my journey went on, the wonder of rediscovering a beautiful piece of art that I hadn't had really the time to appreciate before, or a beautiful composition of music, or the beauty of literature, or the beauty of nature. Suddenly I had time to appreciate things, the wonder of all of that. And I remember as well a feeling of deep gratitude for the empathy of others, gratitude for the strength of others, gratitude for the love of others. And that wonder and that gratitude lifted me up and carried me through my journey with cancer. And I believe our wonder and our gratitude will lift us up and carry us through this as well. I remember in a particular, a nurse, I don't know her name. I'm not even sure she was assigned to me, but she, to me, to this day, epitomizes empathy. I remember lying on a gurney ready to go in for yet another endless round of surgery. I had 11 rounds of surgery before my battle was over. And I was crying on the table. And I remember this nurse approached me and she held my hand and she looked me in the eyes and she said, "You're going to be all right. It's going to be all right." And I believed her. And then I was wheeled into surgery. And yet, because of her empathy, because of her presence, I felt at peace. I remember the strength of so many people I saw in the infusion center. Chemotherapy, for those of you who've ever had it, is a terrible thing. And I remember sometimes honestly feeling sorry for myself because I felt crummy. And yet I would listen to people. I would observe people. I would talk with people who were going through their treatment as well, who actually, in retrospect, had it far worse than I did. And I was inspired by their strength and by their example. They did not know how this would turn out for them, and yet they were determined to show their best selves right to the very end. And I remember love of friends who never left my side, the love of my husband whose care for me was extraordinary, the love of my family. In fact, my family, my marriage, my friendships all became stronger. That feeling of gratitude for others' empathy, for others' strength, for others' love, the wonder of it all helped see me through. And finally, at the very end of my journey with cancer, when I knew actually I had made it and I would survive, I remember going on a walk for the cure. I had never done that before. And I was with thousands of other women and their families and their friends. Some were survivors. Some walked for someone who had not survived. Some walked while ill. And I remember an overwhelming feeling that as lonely as my battle had been, and let us face it, whether it's COVID-19 or cancer or any of the difficulties that each of us face in our lives, disorientation and fear and worry and exhaustion and grief and guilt, those can make us lonely. Those can isolate us. And yet I remember feeling overwhelmingly that I was actually never alone in any of it. And as the thousands of us walked, I was reminded that we are all connected whether we realize it or not, connected for better or for worse. We are all connected, and each of us, all of us, can have an impact, positive or negative, on someone else. The truth is, what we learn from our toughest times defines us. And I do think that what I learned from cancer is what we are all learning from this global pandemic. And it is why the work of the Brem Foundation is so important. We've learned, for example, that we are all connected, and sometimes the people that we don't spend much time thinking about turn out to be absolutely vital to our lives. Whether they are people picking our crops or slaughtering our meat or cleaning our shelves or laboring in hospitals somewhere, they are absolutely vital to us. We are all connected. We've learned that someone gets sick thousands of miles away and it can change our life in profound ways. We've learned that each of us can have an impact, whether it's the Brem Foundation deciding to help women turn their bras into face masks, or whether it's an organization that decides to change its production line to make PPE or cleanser, or whether it's your decision to wear a face mask when you go out and keep apart from others so that you do not infect them or become infected yourself. We're all connected, and we can all have an impact in large ways and in small. There's an old saying you may have heard, which is, tough times build character. In fact, I don't think that's quite right. I think tough times reveal character. And I think all of us have a choice as to what character we want to reveal in tough times. And all of us have to reflect on what are the lessons that will define us going forward that we have learned through our tough times. Tough times reveal character. Do we become, when we are finished with a difficult journey or a difficult patch, and let's face it, tough times come to every life. But when we get through those, do we reveal a character that is bitter and brittle and selfish? Or do we reveal a character that is resilient and strong and generous? I'm often asked to speak about leadership. And it turns out that the qualities of character that, if we choose, define us in the best possible way are the same qualities that define leadership. Are we courageous in the face of fear? You know, courage is not the absence of fear, not at all. And it turns out everybody's afraid at some point about something. And all of us have experienced fear together during this global pandemic. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is the ability to get over fear. Courage is the ability to see the truth that's in front of us, to speak and act on that truth. Courage to make the tough decisions when tough decisions are called for. And courage as well to withstand the criticism that always comes. Dr. Rachel Brem was talking about the very difficult decisions that doctors like she are having to make every single day. And to make those tough decisions, life and death decisions, those doctors need skill, but they also need courage. Because no matter what decision they make, there are consequences. And with consequences, there are always people who second guess and criticize. One of the things that we can choose to learn through tough times is humility. And humility is also an essential characteristic of any good leader. The humility not to discount our own strength, not to be falsely modest, not to claim that we can't make any difference. No, humility is none of those things. Humility is the acknowledgement that we cannot do it all alone, that we do not know it all, that we must ask for help, that we must ask for advice. And great leaders also have empathy. The empathy that nurse showed me many years ago, but empathy is the ability to see someone else, to really see them, not their circumstances, not their appearances, but to see that person and to put ourselves in their place and to identify with them. Humility and empathy are vital to living a good life and revealing a good character, but they are also vital to leadership, because without humility and empathy, we cannot collaborate effectively with others. And it is collaboration that solves problems, and it is solving problems that is the purpose of leadership. And finally, leaders see possibilities, as do we all, when we find the best in our character. We see the possibilities for recovery. We see the possibilities for good things that come out of this bad time. We see the possibility that we may have an opportunity to rethink things that didn't make sense really before, but that we were too busy to actually consider. We see possibilities in our routines that at first seemed so confining and now seem in an odd way liberating, because we have the time to reconnect and to breathe and to think and to feel that wonder and that gratitude once again. Leaders see possibilities, even in tragic circumstances, and most of all, they see possibilities in the people around them. And of course, we're reminded now, if ever we forgot, that we are all connected, that out of sight cannot be out of mind, that if someone does not have access to quality healthcare, that impacts the quality of all of our lives. And we are reminded that each of us can make an impact. It is easy in good times to forget all these lessons. It's easy in good times to kind of coast along. It's easy in good times to get confused about leadership and character. It takes tough times to remind us that character counts actually, and leadership matters. In the good times, we can say to ourselves, well, somebody's a leader because they have a big title. Someone's a leader because they have a big office. Someone's a leader because they have fame or wealth or power. But leadership and character are not about position or title or power or wealth or fame or influence. The truth is, a leader is someone of character, of courage, of humility and empathy, someone who collaborates with others always, someone who sees possibilities in all the people around them, someone who knows in their core that we are all connected and that each of us can make an impact. Each of us can change the order of things for the better. I have been asked on occasion, what is the highest calling of a leader? And my answer has always been the same. The highest calling of a leader is to change the order of things for the better and unlock potential in others. Each of us can do that. All of us have the opportunity to do that. And it is my great hope that one of the things we will be reminded of, all of us, and that one of the things that each of us will discover about ourselves is that we are leaders, that we can have a positive impact and make a real difference and change the order of things for the better. And it is why I am so delighted to join you today and to support the wonderful and important work of the Brem Foundation, an organization that reminds us every single day we are all connected, we all can have a positive impact, and tough times reveal our character. Thanks so much, Rachel. I'll look forward to joining you for some questions at this point.
Thank you, Carly. That was spectacular.
Carly, I can't thank you enough. You really touched me at my core, and I'm very, very moved and inspired right now, and I'm grateful for your insights. I think we've all really benefited. We've had a couple of great questions come in. The first is from somebody who wants to know what is it about your experiences, and specifically with your reference to humility, what is it about not knowing that we can all understand and benefit from now? Can you give some advice on how to deal with a world where 4 months ago we felt like we had all the answers and now we feel sometimes like we have none?
Yeah. So thank you. What a wonderful question. Well, let me go back to the beginning of my career, if I may, because, and then I'll bring it to the present time. You know, I did in fact start as a secretary in a 9-person real estate firm. And my college degree was in history and philosophy, which was a wonderful education, but didn't get me a job. And I dropped out of law school after 2 months. In short, my resume was pretty terrible. And my first job in a big corporation was with AT&T in downtown Washington, D.C., and I didn't know anything. So I was forced to be humble. I couldn't go around and tell people how much I knew. And yeah, I had a brand new minted MBA, but I knew I didn't know anything. That forced humility, however, caused me to learn the importance of asking a lot of questions and listening to others. And what I figured out was that there were lots of problems all around me and lots of people who knew what the problems were, but somehow we just weren't getting it together to solve the problems. And so that's what I started to do, working with other people to solve problems. I didn't need to know it all to help solve problems. Now let me fast forward. What happens to each of us when we face unexpected difficulty or tragedy? Whether it's the death of a child or the death of a loved one or a diagnosis that terrifies us, what do each of us have to face immediately is humility. I am not in charge. And in truth, I think that's the most important lesson about humility of all. We all think we have this illusion that we are in charge, that we're in charge of the circumstances around us, that we're in charge of other people, that we're in charge of the next day, that we're in charge of this plan that we have. And yet, tough times remind us we're not in charge of a lot of things. Actually, we are in charge of only one thing. What we are in charge of is our character. What we are in charge of is our response. What we are in charge of is whether we will be selfish or generous, courageous or fearful, whether we will choose to make a positive difference or choose to walk away or look away. And that is why humility is so vital to leaders, because leaders understand it isn't their job to preside, particularly in tough times. So no, we don't have the answers, but I can guarantee you, having led through many tough times, having endured many tough times, I guarantee you, we will figure the answers out. If we will remember to stay connected, if we will reveal a character we are proud of, and if we will remember we each can make a positive impact, we'll figure it out.
Thank you, Carly.
Just want to add to that. In medicine, humility is integral to what we do. That sometimes we have wonderful success stories like Carly, like me, and sometimes we lose. There are so many things that with all the information and all the data and all the advances that we have, we can decrease the death rate from breast cancer by 40%. But we can't do a blessed thing about COVID right now. So humility in medicine, you can't be the kind of physician one should want to be without humility, because we know, and unfortunately we see so often that things are out of our control. And the same thing is true with relationships. On a personal note, that as much as we want everything to be perfect, we want every person to be healed, we want every relation to be perfect, we want COVID to go away, we just simply can't do it. So humility is a necessary trait to be the kind of physician, person, woman that you want, man that you want to be, or any person that you want to be.
Thank you both. Somebody else would like to know, one of the challenges leaders face now is how to lead employees to re-engage. We all face new risks, and that risk is in direct conflict to getting people back to work. It's likely to change the way working looks, remote work, video meetings, etc. Leaders have to balance care for their teams, but also care for succeeding in their missions. What guidance do you have for prioritizing safety and leading teams through the uncertainty of re-engaging?
Yes, it is the question in these times.
Right.
You know, it's interesting. In the business world, in the medical world perhaps as well, but in the business world, you know, you'll hear people say, oh, people are our greatest asset. But we don't always act that way, do we? And in fact, in last fall, the Business Roundtable, a large organization that represents some of the largest businesses in this country, felt the need to issue a statement saying that a CEO's job was to care for not just their shareholders, but their employees and their customers and their communities. It's such an obvious statement, but business felt the need to say it because business hasn't always acted that way. Now is actually an opportunity. Yes, we can all, as business people, and I run a small business now, but we can all regret that we have to worry about things like our employees' safety in addition to going back to work, and we have to be mindful of what's going on in the community around us. But I believe it is a great opportunity for every business to reestablish itself as a responsible citizen. In the year 2000, I gave a speech and I said, it is a CEO's job, any business leader's job, to balance the needs of their investors, yes, but also of their customers, of their employees, of their communities. That is what makes a business sustainable. That is a business with soul and character. And so the most enlightened business leaders out there are thinking about this as an opportunity to demonstrate a commitment to their employees and their safety and their well-being, a commitment to the communities in which they live and work, a commitment to their customers as well. Do we have to rethink things? Yes. Must we acknowledge that there are some businesses that sadly will simply not make it through this because the burden is crushing on them? And is that a terrible tragedy, particularly for the small community-based businesses in this country? Yes. But of course, a business leader must care for their employees' safety and recognize that some employees will feel safer than others, and so adjustments will have to be made. One more comment, if I may. I think we've learned a lot about how effective telework can actually be. I think we've learned a lot about how employees can actually be more productive if they are able to spend more time centered with their families. Andrea, you and I were talking about that before this conference started. I think we've discovered that employees can be more productive if they don't have to spend 1 or 2 or 3 hours every single day in maddening traffic. Those are good lessons we can learn.
Thank you, Carly. I agree. And it actually leads beautifully into the next question, which is you have spent much of your career as a tech executive. Tech has basically saved us in the last 3-4 months. What is your vision of where we go with technology when it comes to education, health, work? How do you see its role increasing or staying where it is now?
So I think it's true that technology has saved us in many ways. I think there are 2 things that we frequently forget about technology, 2 things that concern me, have concerned me for the last decade and concern me going forward as well, for all of technology's incredible benefits. The first is that technology is a tool. And like any tool, we should be in control of it, not the other way around. For the last decade or so, technology has controlled us. Technology has controlled us. Social media has made us more cruel, more callous, more thoughtless, more careless. That's not social media's fault, that's our fault. How much time have we all spent doing useless, silly, destructive things because technology put it right in front of us, and somehow we thought the most important thing we can do is respond to this technology immediately. Actually, it's not. So I hope that as we come out of this, we'll remind ourselves, you know what, technology is a tool. I need to be in charge of how I use the technology to be more productive, to be more empathetic, to have a bigger impact. I can't let the technology control me. And I think all of us have felt this relief of a little bit of disconnection from the hundreds of emails and the thousands of things we get on texts and tweets and all the rest of it. Let's remember that. The other thing I will say about technology is the technology industry, unfortunately, has become too concentrated, and that's a concern. Power concentrated is power abused, always, in government and in business. And when we have so much power in the hands of so few technology companies, that's a problem, because there's too much power over us. There's too much power over information, but concentrated power also over time begins to destroy innovation. It is not power concentrated that creates innovation. Innovation, as Rachel can tell you in the medical field as well, innovation is kind of unpredictable. And sometimes it comes from unexpected things. So as we go forward, yes, let's use technology as a tool. Let's hold technology companies accountable for the power they wield. And let's look for opportunities to disperse some of the power that a few of these companies have gathered. Because in the end, that much power in those few hands isn't good for any of us.
Thank you very much. We have two more questions.
Let me add one more thing, if I may. For me, the integration of technology as we have now has been an extraordinary thing in that we have been trying, it's opened opportunities, and Carly certainly spoke about opportunities. We have been trying for a decade to get telemedicine going. And, it piddled at best, but now it's absolutely taken over. And, we have to rethink, why does someone have to take an entire day off and travel and wait and then be seen by a physician or a caretaker, a provider that can be done by telemedicine? And some of the other unexpected things about technology is, at our institution, at many institutions, the no-show rate for patients has plummeted. So we've gone to a 3% no-show rate from a significantly higher. So we're taking away the onerous part of it, of seeing a physician, seeing a provider, and using technology to make it less expensive, particularly as you talk about for those less fortunate, for the underserved. Taking a day off of work is very difficult. If we can train and use technology to send blood pressure cuffs and then reconnect with the physician. Today, I was just reading about an ultrasound company that's going to be sending handheld ultrasound to patients that they can scan themselves and a physician can look at it. So for me, the opportunity to make higher quality care more accessible has been exponentially facilitated by technology in a way that I couldn't have imagined. And it's been one more thing that I feel grateful for in our very challenging times.
It's such a fantastic point, Rachel. If you read the history of pandemics, you'll find that after each pandemic, there is a great leap forward in some way, that people figure out something that is good for everyone's health as a result. And Rachel's absolutely right. Telemedicine will be that thing we figure out. And let's face it, Zoom calls are the great equalizer, right? I mean, we're all kind of the same on a Zoom call, and people are intimidated by doctors. They're intimidated by hospitals. They're intimidated by all that. And so it's a great leveler, a great equalizer, and can solve this problem of inadequate and inequitable access to healthcare if we will use it as the great tool it is.
Thank you both so much. We have two more questions I'd like to address before we wrap up today. The first is from someone who says, thank you for this moving and important talk. I'm interested to know from both of you in health and business, respectively, who are you really looking up to and admiring right now? Which leaders are you really finding inspiring in how they're addressing this and dealing with what's before us.
So Rachel, you want to take that one first, or I'm happy to go, whatever you'd like.
I am looking in our world. I am looking to the innovators who are taking a very challenging situation, pivoting in a way that was inconceivable before, and finding something better. So, the idea of shutting down, a service because of COVID is unimaginable. But we're being very fluid in being able to find very difficult solutions with perhaps less than the amount of data that we normally would use to make these monumental shifts. So I'm going to stick with leaders in medicine because, Carly, this is definitely what I want for you.
Well, I'm going to give you two examples. First, an example of what we would traditionally think of as a leader, that is someone with a position and title. I think we've seen great leadership on behalf of many governors of both parties. Governors who have had the courage to see the truth and speak the truth and act on the truth and take the criticism that comes along with that. So I think governors across our country have done really a very fine job in very difficult circumstances. But then let me go to something far more personal on a smaller scale, because I think it's the smaller scale that each of us can relate to. There are many stories I read each day about leaders, but I'll just pick one. A woman in a community, I don't even remember the community, but one day she decided to go out on her front porch and give a cello concert. Now, you can imagine that woman sitting in her house and talking, the voice we all get in her head. You can imagine the voice in her head saying, I can't do this. I mean, maybe I won't play very well. Maybe people will say, what are you doing? Maybe people will tell me they don't like cello music. Maybe people will say, what difference do you think you can make? And yet she got out on her porch and she started playing the cello. And over time, her neighborhood gathered day after day to hear her play. There are millions of stories like that all over our community, all over our country, actually all over the world. That is leadership. Someone who decides, I'm going to do something because I am connected with others that makes a positive impact on them. That's leadership. And that's the kind we can all aspire to.
Carly and Rachel, thank you. I'd like to add, actually, if I may, two personal examples. This question really touched me as well. And one is global and one is more local. The global one was actually something that came to my attention this week. It was a letter written by Brian Chesky, who's the CEO of Airbnb. And the letter was informing 25% of his workforce that he was laying them off. And what he exhibited there was the core of what humanity should be. He told people that this isn't their fault, and he promised to help them get back on their feet. And he's putting whatever money and resources he has where his mouth is in that letter. And I would encourage anybody who's interested in leadership to read the letter. It's all over the internet. But it really shows the beauty of somebody who could otherwise be pompous, who could otherwise be brazen or callous. And he felt so human. You could hear him almost crying in the letter. And it really inspired me because it was somebody who really has so much wealth in so many ways behind him and didn't use that. I mean, in fact, used it for good. And so that was something I wanted to mention. And then the other, just to keep in mind, that I see every day in my home are the teachers of these children that are innovating in ways and with speed that I never could have imagined. So just to add them to this list, what they're able to do for kids is really remarkable under these circumstances when they have their own lives to juggle. So just, two examples of things that I am also inspired by. The last question that we have time for is, what is the very first thing a leader should do when facing adversity?
You know, there's in business, you hear a lot of talk about strategic vision. And most people understand that to be looking ahead. And of course, when adverse times hit, they're usually unexpected, and we're reminded that we cannot predict the future. We can have all kinds of plans for next year, but suddenly something unexpected happens. And so the first thing I would say is leaders in any time, but particularly in adverse times, need to have peripheral vision. Peripheral vision. By that, I mean the ability to look around, to see what's actually going on, to see what's happening, not just to them, not just to their business, but to those their business or their foundation serves, to the communities around them, to their employees and their lives. Look around. It's only by looking around that we can then ask the next set of questions, which is what's really going on. You see, a leader, particularly in adverse circumstances, needs to see the truth, needs to really understand what's going on so that you can speak the truth. This is really bad. We all have to stay home. You have cancer. I have to lay you off. A leader has to see the truth and speak the truth so that they can act on the truth. And you cannot do that unless you look around and actually see what's going on. There are three things that now I think any leader should be asking themselves as we sort of start to approach the coming out phase of all of this. The first question is, what was I doing before all this happened that I should rethink, that maybe I don't want to go back to? What should I use this as an opportunity to let go of? The second question, what have I learned? What have I learned during this difficult time that I want to keep doing? Telemedicine, for example. How do I really double down on something that I've learned that's going to make my team, my family, my community, my business, my hospital better? And then the third question is, what did I see for my future? What was in my future plan that is still important? Now is not to abandon your strategy or to give up on all your goals, but now is the time to relentlessly prioritize on what's actually important. And what, after examining question 1 and question 2, you conclude, you know what? That is something that still matters. It's still the right goal. I'm still going to go after it, but I'm going to let go of some habits that don't serve me well anymore. And I'm going to do some new things, try some new things, incorporate some new things that I learned in the midst of these difficult times.
Thank you, Carly. I think that's sage advice and very practical as we wrap up. Rachel, do you want to add anything to that?
I couldn't agree more. I think we need to look at the problem and look at it not just from our perspective, but from the perspective of others involved in the trenches, and it might open new opportunities and new insights for us. So thank you for that, Carly.
Thank you. Thank you both so much. I want to thank the over 100 people who joined us this afternoon, and a special thank you to Carly and to Rachel for sharing these very important perspectives. I hope that everyone here will be able to join us again on May 26th to hear Jean Case speak about fearlessness and risk, and on June 2nd to hear Valerie Jarrett speak about connecting civic engagement, voting, and health. I also hope that you were moved to donate and to support us today. There is a link in your chat box, and any amount that you give will save a life. Save your spot for the upcoming events. Be well, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Thank you very much.